Hey everyone, happy Friday, and today we are continuing our walk, or maybe it's a run. Maybe we're going through the Bible at a really rapid pace, considering that we're looking at a book every week. But by the same token, we're essentially just looking at one verse, one book at a time. And today we're looking at the book of Judges. Now, Judges is a fascinating book because it kind of is between two different leadership styles. And it's in many ways kind of a trial of kind of a loosely organized society that is designed and created around a certain set of laws. And it would have worked provided the people would have committed themselves to that particular set of laws, and most specifically to the God who gave them those laws. It's a fascinating study of tribalism and how the breakdown within each individual group kind of lends to a breakdown of the whole. There's different points in the book where certain judges who come up kind of as rulers and unite the tribes again around the following of God, and then also following his instructions, and then they overcome the oppression that has come upon them. But then they often goes back into this tribalism as they start to drift away and go and do their own things. It's a great lesson for us as a church and as a society where we seem to put all of these different socioeconomic factors as more important than some of the ways in which we are instructed to follow God. Now, one might think that the key verse is a verse that kind of shows up at the very end of the book, and in a lot of ways it's a summary. It's a verse from Judges 21 verse 25. It basically says, "In those days Israel had no king, and everyone did as he or she saw fit." They just kind of did whatever they wanted, as they didn't have a single leader who was instructing them on how to follow God, essentially. And so there's a summary of the book in that, and that shows you kind of what goes on within that particular book, but it also shows that this writer has a particular kind of agenda. And many scholars think that the writer of Judges, or the collator that kind of took these stories together and put them down, is trying to show or legitimize the kingship, particularly the kingship of David, this kingship which is designed to bring all of the tribes together to serve one God, the God who had rescued them. But ultimately, this isn't just about David, it's about a particular leader who would guide them to follow God properly. And as we go through the Kings, as we look at the books of Samuel and Kings and Chronicles, we'll see that a particular king is not sufficient in order to gather the people together to follow God properly. This points us ahead, of course, towards Jesus in the New Testament, a king or a person who fully images God and brings people together and leads and guides them into the fullness that God has provided for them. But the question still remains, what is a key verse for the book of Judges? Well, I think it's this verse in Judges chapter 8. Judges chapter 8, verse, where are we? Verse 34. It says, "They, the Israelites, did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all of their enemies on every side." And that, I think, is the key for this particular book and all of the things that happened. It's that they didn't take time to think about, to reflect on all of the ways in which God had been with them and had rescued them, and they saw God's instructions rather as onerous or as difficult or as hardships to bear, rather than as good instructions given by someone who has already done so much good for them. That's a good reminder for us too, to see how quickly it is that we can fragment into different groups, or we can start to argue and bicker against one another, or we can be simply led astray and go into all kinds of different things when we don't take the time to intentionally reflect on all of the things that God has done, which is one of the reasons why I love the Christmas season, because right now the whole world is kind of creating an atmosphere for us to reflect on what God has done. Sometimes it's easy to forget that that's what this season is all about, but if we can remember that the reason we celebrate and the reason we give gifts to one another is because we have been given the greatest gift that could ever be given. If we remember that, it'll be easier for us to maintain unity, to be together, and to be joyful in this time. So if this walk through the Bible is helpful for you, I'd encourage you to subscribe, click the little bell, you'll be notified all the times that something shows up on our YouTube channel. Comment down below on some of the ways in which maybe you have seen or experienced some helpful ways for us to be able to remember what God has done.